Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of Severance Season 2, Episode 2, Goodbye, Miss Selvig. So we continue where we left off from the end of Season 1 again, but this time we're starting from the Outies' perspectives. I'm happy they went right into getting what happened with the Outies. This episode didn't kind of let that linger the whole season, so it got me really excited and a cool feeling of like maybe this will be the trend for a lot of the season going back and forth between Innie and Outie. But we get to start with Mark in that big moment because he just screamed, "She's alive," and he basically spooks everyone at the party. Now, he jokingly calls his sister Devon Persephone. In Greek mythology, Persephone was a goddess of spring, was severed from her mother, Demeter, goddess of agriculture. This was done by Hades. It allowed her to become the queen of the underworld, and Persephone, being home in spring, caused the plants to bloom, and in winter returned to the underworld, and then the plants would die. So, why I think they had this name for Devon is I think Devon in the life of Mark is his Persephone, and him being the plants that when he goes into the winter, let's say in Lumon, he doesn't have that light there that lets the best of him come out. And I think that's what Devon's role is right now in this show, is that when he's with Devon, it's the best person he can be around right now, who has a really good instinct about all this. And this episode to me solidified how important that character of Devon is going to be going forward. I really think she's going to be an endgame character and have a lot of significance in Mark's life and in his story. And I feel like she's going to have a big jump up in scenes in this season. Now we see Mark is also confused at why he's holding his wedding photo at that moment. Now we'll get back to Mark, Devon, and Rick in a minute, but it cuts to Helena rubbing her neck. That's no subtle thing there. We know that she committed suicide by trying to hang herself in the elevator. So that scar is there. And this episode does so well is kind of make you think how much of the innies and outies are blending with each other just a little bit. That transfers over, and that her thinking of that is a big thing because there's a lot of Helena we're getting to see now a full episode of, which we've never seen before, and how she is looking at things with Heliar, and that she's still thinking of that suicide attempt. Now, when her father, James Egan, comes in and calls her a fetid moppet, I lost it. I do not know how Britt Lauer kept a straight face through that. And you see he is absolutely appalled at what she did. Like, this is the biggest no-no. And as she mentions in her apology video, that this company already has a lot of critiques towards it, and this is just going to make that look worse. And she knows the ramifications of that. And like I said in my first episode, how much it connects to Scientology, Severance, this is just another case of that, where it is known by many people to be not a good organization and up to nefarious things. This isn't like not public knowledge, and I feel like that's a lot what's going on in the outside world of Lumon. I love the haunting shot though they had of Milchick seeing Dylan's Outie leave for the day after he knows they just got in a fight and Dylan's got an ice pack on his head and he has no idea what just happened. But you see the main goal here is to find out who the innies talked to while they were out in the real world, and that's Milchick's job. And Milchick asks Helena, should I fire them? And Helena says, let Kier guide your hand. Now, knowing that, it's a good line because it gives Milchick that freedom to kind of make these calls and why he will do that, which we'll break down when we get to that. But I love the shot of Helena walking through the building of Lumon, seeing how big Lumon is. And I also think, too, it's kind of subconsciously reminding you, even though Helena Egan's big, this monster of Lumon is even way bigger than her, how big this organization is and how many powerful people there are running through it, and how even she is still under these chains of her father. But she goes right into the boardroom with Cobell waiting. And Helena will tell Cobell, you proved your loyalty tonight. It's why I want to ask you back. But Cobell wants an apology first. Helena gives an apology from her and then says from her father, who didn't even bother to show up, who Cobell asked to see if he was coming, and from the board, of course, who doesn't talk to basically anybody that's not important to them. And it's funny because then when Cobell accepts the apology, she fully gets ready to go into damage control mode and get back to her job, but is stopped short. She's offered a promotion, and it's Severance Advisory Council. She knows this is some made-up job they just made to kind of keep her under their eye, keep her quiet. And that's why she says, I never heard of such a thing. And she still wants to be running the severed floor. They do not want her there. She's too dangerous. And she gets the worst news that Milchick took her job. And that's why Cobell calls Helena out and says, you don't value me, you fear me. And you see Helena says, we fear no one. But in that great kind of line where deep down they do. And Cobell can read right through the lines here. It's also the first time we're seeing this character of Mr. Drummond, which we're going to break down more as he gets more important in the episode. Now we'll see Natalie will record Helena doing her damage control apology video. I love how in this show they edited so smoothly, cutting back and forth between that and seeing Milchick making his rounds. And the score, per usual, is great here. And it was also great even when we saw Helena walking through the building. So I love seeing what they're cooking up music-wise. So good. Shapiro is just one of the best right now. Now, in her apology, she says she made the poor decision to consume alcohol and a non-Lumon medication for an arm rash, which is such, just saying it is such a stretch. And I love she points out non-Lumon medication too, because it's probably in their belief system, only Lumon medication is what you're supposed to take. She also says, when Lumon falters, it is the cherished workers and their families who suffer first. That's what we're seeing cutting between this. This is actually from the point of view of Irving and Dylan's Outies, that this is bad news for them that they're getting fired from Lumon. This is soul crushing. And then she says her saying that her innie was tortured was a joke and a lie. And then once it cuts the video, you see right away Helena takes that mask off of all the BS she was just spewing. Now we get to see Milchick on his motorcycle too. He has his Kier Egan license plate like we've seen before with other characters, like Mark has a Kier Egan license plate. But he goes to see Irving first, and Milchick fires him, and I believe he fired Irving easily because he can sense, clearly this guy doesn't really know what just happened. But this is actually a hard fire for Milchick because he does respect Irving, I think, the most out of anybody, telling him he is his friend and is a man of principle. And you see Irving is crushed. Then he fires Dylan, saying he was in a physical altercation and he was the aggressor, which is the opposite. And you see Dylan says, what am I supposed to tell my wife? There are some people thinking his wife was dead, but she is not. But he's also crushed. Now this will cut to the first time we see the new intro. It's interesting in this new intro, amazing like the first season, and it shows you in this one the car crash that Gemma was in. You see the car in this ice-capped water, and we'll see as this episode goes on how much importance Gemma has in this story. And we'll also see this theme of babies a lot in the intro, and it reminds me of the baby goats. And you even see a baby Kier at the end, and it makes you think why they're testing these baby goats, and they're probably testing them to see if they can have some kind of effect on their brain at such a young age with whatever they're doing with the severing and their ultimate goal. And you see it's also Innie and Mark Outie working together in this intro, which I thought was fascinating. I don't know what to make of Cobell holding the book of Mark in it, and it's interesting that it is Cobell, that person in the intro, but it could be her complications of having this love for the Kier world of it all, but also there's some fascination she has with Mark. I love, though, the shot at the end with it down the dark hallway. You see it's Miss Casey, and then it turns into Helly, and then a terrifying moment where you see the back of Mark's head open up and his eye looking at you, something that just creeps you out watching, especially if you watch this at night in the dark. Now let's go to when Mark, Devin, and Rickon are talking about what Innie Mark just did in front of them, screaming she's alive. Now, knowing more about the Gemma situation, that line means even more to me because I'm a huge fan of The Bride of Frankenstein, and they say that in the movie when she's coming alive, and this makes so much sense they use that exact line, because if we're looking at this story of Gemma now, aka Miss Casey, that if Gemma died, that Mark was saying in the diner later in this episode to Devin that he identified her body, saw her dead. I do believe she died, and that Lumon revived her somehow through Severance, and that when we saw Miss Casey, she's like this Bride of Frankenstein type that's like a body put together with some part of somebody else's brain or someone else's severance, or maybe part of Mark even. I don't know, but it's crazy, but it makes sense that you can now put Gemma in that kind of way of a Frankenstein type character that was put together to keep them alive, and now it really looks awesome seeing that line, she's alive, meaning more than you think at first. I also love Rickon calls Mark's Innie a jewel, and he also keeps saying that Patton saved the baby, and I love that character of Patton that's with Rickon because he was so excited when he was the second person to find the baby, and then he claimed he's the one who saved the day. But you see Rickon and Mark start to agree it was about the baby, because the last thing Mark wants to do in anything in his life is face his grief with his wife dying and dealing with that. And you have to remember watching this show, I've been listening to the Severance podcast that Ben Stiller and Adam Scott do. They did all season 1, and they talk about everything going on, they break it down, and now they're doing season 2. But in the season 1 podcast, Ben Stiller said that the North Star of this show is really Mark's story about how sad and like lonely this guy is to keep doing these things to himself and not facing what went on with Gemma. So you always have to keep that in mind with Outie Mark and what he's going to do in his decisions. But you see, Devin is the truth here. She has doubt about everything. And if Mark was to go that far as Devin, then he's going to have to face the fact that his wife might actually still be alive and deal with this whole thing even more. Now, I love Rickon calls Cobell now Cobelvig. And I also want to just say what is so good about this show is Devin and Mark's sibling arguments. That happens here, but also happens in the diner later, and their relationship. And it's props to Jen Tulloch and Adam Scott, because this might be the best sibling relationship and accurate sibling relationship I've seen on screen, me having a sister. It is so accurate and feels so real, like these two have known each other forever. It's wild. But you see, Rickon even talks about the abuses that Outie Mark was bringing up that he was going through. So Outie Mark is hearing this, but he's processing this, in a very slow way. And this is what I do believe, though, is part of the reason that he knows deep down that Devin is saying something that he should be listening to, and that he should be listening to his Outie Mark as well a little bit. Like, that's there. That's why he almost wasn't going to go back to work. But Milchick knows how to manipulate on that guilt. It's why they pick people who are suffering to go into cults like this. So Milchick shows up. Devin, with the win of the episode, smartly covers that wedding photo. That would have been huge if that was just sitting on a table and Milchick saw that, because then he would know right away that they know something is up with Miss Casey. And I love Devin reads through Milchick right away, bad vibes, because Milchick asks her, what did he say to you, talking about Outie Mark? And she says, if I tell you, you are going to punish him for it. And he's like, we have no punishments at Lumon, Milchick says, which is such BS. And then Devin even brings up the lactation problem as Cobell. But see, Milchick, what he's been doing this whole season smartly, he pins everything on Cobell. It's an easy out. But he also promises that she won't be on the severed floor again, and that they won't be bothered by her in the outside world. And you can look at the end scene as Cobell, part of her just getting out of there pissed off at what she was offered. And you can also look at it as maybe she was also forced to leave immediately because she can't be in that vicinity or even near Lumon anymore, or near especially Mark. And like I said, when Milchick says to Mark, is there anything you can tell me? Mark looks like he's about to slip up and spill the beans, but Devin's look of serious concern is just a reminder to him subconsciously, and that little part of him, of Outie Mark, to not say anything to this man. But Milchick knows he's going to have more work to do with Mark, and he hasn't fully convinced him to get back to work on Monday, so that's why he'll visit him later, which we'll get to. Now, a very interesting moment is Helena watching old footage of the Innies, but in particular Mark and Heliar. There's two ways you can look at this. The big theory going that Heliar that we've seen in Lumon is now Helena. If we're looking at it that way, you can maybe look at this her studying at first to see how everyone's acting, how Heliar acts, so she can kind of get the mannerisms down. Or it has nothing to do with that, and that isn't the right theory, and that she's watching on loop her kiss with Mark, and you see there's an extreme close-up on Helena's eye watching this. They always do that in this show because it's showing that somewhere in there's a connection between this Innie side of them with their Outie side. She's feeling those feelings a little bit. And I'm also guessing that when we learn eventually about Helena's backstory, if we're going by cult backstory, she was raised into this. She was raised in Egan. So she probably has some messed up upbringing about her beliefs on love, relationships, sex. So this is probably something she might even be experiencing for the first time in a long time and kind of liking it. And I believe that that love the Innie has for Mark might be the only hope in a change for Helena, if that seeps up to her more and more, which Milchick will talk about later in this episode, which is a huge line, probably the biggest line I've heard in a while, about how he's insinuating that there's a part of this that's like the Innie's supposed to affect the Outie and change your world for the better outside too. But now watching this episode, I'm on the other team again now. Now I'm thinking it is actually really Heliar that goes downstairs and not Helena. That's just my gut feeling. It's switched now, but we'll see. Now Outie Dillon goes to Great Doors, it's called. It's a job interview to be a door salesman. Now, what was crazy about watching this was in the Severance podcast, in the season 1 episodes, Dan Erickson, the showrunner creator, he talked about how he worked at a door company. It was this boring job he had. So there you go. That's why you're seeing a door company put in this show. But it's wild seeing Outie Dillon not excited about the benefit of a coffee maker, where any Dillon would go crazy for that. He wants to know about the healthcare benefits instead. But when he tells a worker he's a severed, it's taboo. And you see the interview's over. He's like, not a certain kind of two people I want. And he thinks it's abhorrent. Now, what's interesting is we hear Gretchen for the first time calling him on the phone, but we don't see her. So I'm wondering what the hell is Gretchen's deal and why did Dylan sever? That's a big mystery. But she seems kind, so we'll see. Now, Devin will meet Mark at the diner. She's so curious now. But Mark reminds Devin he saw Gemma's body, identified her, which I thought was a huge line, and why I explained that I think she's like in a Frankenstein situation now. And like even with the cliffhanger last week that they're putting info into her chip. But Mark, Outie, we see that a whole side of him here, where he's one-upping the grief to Devin here, where she's trying to sympathize with him about what happened to Gemma. And he's basically telling her that if this happened to Rickon, that he would feel sorry for her, but not connected to it, which is just cold. But they're in Pip's diner. This is where he got the discount in season 1 to go to when Lumon messed up. And that's their way to kind of get people to get a little forgiveness if they've hurt themselves and they don't know why it happened in Lumon. So something's up with Pips too, because Pips, whoever works at Pips, it's definitely owned by Lumon or some association. So that's going to be important. And that's why they're able to have someone as mysterious as Drummond there, just with his frolic tattoo in his hand, by the way, listening to the whole convo. Again, very like Scientology, because this is what they do with people who have left the church. They spy on them. They want to know what they're telling people, if they're spewing lies, etc. So it's similar to that, where these are just people protecting their cause and spying on people. And you can tell, as I'll say later on, Mr. Drummond, that he's actually more worried about Devin than Outie Mark. Now, I love in Mark's apartment, the most depressing apartment ever. You see the two fishes separated in the fish tank. Very severed theme there. And Milchick shows up with a Lumon fruit basket with what fruit in the middle? A pineapple, which is a big theme this episode. And the pineapple bobbing. So these pineapple he's bringing as gift baskets, we'll see you do to Irving and Dylan later. And we'll see Miss Coble say like, oh, what did he bring a pineapple? Is this, to me, a new initiative that Milchick brought in. And when we saw in the video the pineapple bobbing, I like theories people had about, because their hands were tied behind their back too, that this could also be kind of some kind of torture they'll have them do. And someone had said in the trailers for this season that at one point we see Heliar's head get pushed into the water, so maybe that's her going through pineapple bobbing, because obviously it would hurt bobbing for pineapples. But I think these are the leftover pineapples from whatever they're doing with the pineapple bobbing that they're putting in these gift baskets. Now Milchick offers Mark a 20% bump, which is big, and he says they'll investigate Disney's claims and regular wellness checks from independent organizations now, which are both just BS for sure. But what was important was he brings up, and this is great writing, what Mark said as a motivation for severing, and obviously has to do with Gemma, and that he said, since she died, every day feels like a year, felt like choking on her ghost. I love when they're talking about this line, it shows half of Mark's face in like complete darkness, that very, very dark side of him. But you see that Milchick gets to manipulate him now. He's like, the Mark I have come to know at Lumon is happy. He cares for people. And he is funny. It's like the opposite way of the wellness checks where they tell you about the outside version of you. Now he's telling you about the innie version of him, which is, again, not even that accurate. It's a little bit accurate where, yeah, he's a happier guy, the innie Mark for sure, but it's not this just total happy and even bliss. And he's like, he knows nothing of the pain I see you in right now. And he's found love. And then he's saying the solace you have given him down there will make its way to you. It just takes time. So this is a hint at what this goal is of Egan and Lumon and having a new life started that you can then transfer maybe these emotions that you've built in your innie form to your outie form. But it also could be Milchick spewing a lot of BS and trying to hook him in that might not just be something they're even close to yet. And it's the opposite effect where the innie is actually just being used to revive dead people. But Outie Mark is going to be someone who would cave to this because of the grief he's not facing, the demons he's not facing and dealing with his wife's death, that, hey, it's just easier to be severed half the day, right? I think he's too scared to even look at the thought that Gemma might be alive and there's more to it. I just don't think he can emotionally handle it. So he has a choice here. He's sitting in his car pondering it Monday morning while Helena and Milchick are watching him. We get to see their discussions behind the scene, which is pretty cool. These are scenes I thought we wouldn't see till way later, so it's nice to see them now. But Milchick, as the new boss, has this tough task. He has 48 hours to pull together the B team to work with Mark. And it's interesting because then it just seems like from the start, they weren't even planning to send Heliar back. So that's why it makes me think it actually is Heliar by the end of this. Like if it was a plan that Helena would go down there, that would have already been in the thought of them to do that and have her watch everything with Mark. Milchick hopes there will be chemistry with the new team, but Helena says, we don't need chemistry. We need Mark S. back to work long enough to complete Cold Harbor, which was what we saw he was doing with Gemma. It was Cold Harbor on the screen. We know now, which is a huge answer, that their goal with Mark S. is to be getting that chip, those tempers controlled or put into her or taken away, whatever, into Gemma, and making her whatever they want her to eventually be at the end of the day, reviving her into what their goal is, maybe just to control these people that were originally dead. But it's an oversight on Helena's part, because when she's saying they don't need chemistry, it's furthest from the truth, because Milchick was right on that, because Mark was just pissed and he wasn't vibing any of it. And now they have to bring everybody back. So that was actually a good call on Milchick's part to say that. And we see a couple days later them listening to Mark's plea on the board tape to bring his team back. And Mr. Drummond just says the board is going to give him what he wants, including Helly R. He won't finish without them. So you see her look of worry, and clearly she knows how dangerous Helly R can be, her innie self. And maybe she doesn't know how to feel about a possible feeling of love seeping into her towards Mark S. downstairs. Now we get to see Mark S. walking into work in and out from the Audie's perspective this time, but it's so interesting to see he passes Mark M, not even knowing who this guy is, and he's pissed he was laid off after just working 3 days. And we get to see the Audie's checking in. Helly goes last, but she has a sad, worried look on her face. We don't get to see her, though, cut in and out to confirm that suspicion. If she's really going into the severed Helly R, they leave it ambiguous, but to be fair, they did that with Irving and Dylan, too, so I just think now I'm in the camp going the other way, where I do think that is the real Helly R we're seeing downstairs right now, and that when she, in episode 1, is being a little weird and off, I think she's actually traumatized by seeing who her real self is, scared to tell them, but also she's just acting off in general because she might also still have some seeping in, knowing now who Helly is upstairs into herself, and why she might just be a little more cautious than the usual Helly we see. Or she's Helena, who knows. But the last scene of the episode is Mark catches Selvig when she's leaving and confronts her. And she even calls him out and says he's so easy to sway, which is true. But Mark stops her and looks at her, and he says, "Do you know something about Gemma?" And you see the guilt on Selvig's eyes. This is great acting by Patricia Arquette, obviously, but it's showing you the human part of her that's deep down there, that likes Mark and knows what really happened, the effed up truth behind all this that we don't know and that Mark doesn't know. And the human part she definitely has to suppress. That's why she has to scream. She's suppressing it because of her beliefs in Kier and what they tell you to do. And this is what happens to people in a cult, where they say that with cults. I was watching another documentary about cults, and this psychologist is saying that you have to suppress your natural human things so far down, but there's always hope, because there's always still there. No matter what you've been taught in a cult, there's like a voice that's so tiny, but it's telling you the truth situation. To get out of a cult, you kind of got to lean into that and follow that, as hard as that may be. But that is what she's feeling, obviously, why she screams and drives away. She's suppressing her true nature. So overall, I thought this was a really good episode, and a big step up even from episode 1. I thought this was like really well done. Like, with the score, with the visuals, the acting, the writing, the mystery, and we're getting answers too. So this makes me just so excited. The best show on TV is just back, and it's still amazing. So I'm giving this one a 9.2. Let me know your thoughts down below, and please hit that sub button. It helps in so many ways. I'll see you next time.